Good evening. My name is Ariane Michaud, and today I'm going to take a comprehensive look at the strategic landscape of bank mergers and how they are shaping competitive advantage within the financial sector. Over the past few years, the banking industry has navigated a unique mix of financial, regulatory, and technological pressures. These pressures have not only accelerated consolidation, but have also redefined what it takes for banks to remain competitive. So, in this presentation, we'll explore the underlying drivers behind the recent surge in bank mergers, the strategic value of scale, the role of technology investment, the evolving regulatory environment, and the potential risk ahead. Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to take. Good evening. My name is Ariane Michaud, and today I am going to take a comprehensive look at the strategic landscape of bank mergers and how they are shaping competitive advantage within the financial sector. Over the past few years, the banking industry has navigated a unique mix of financial, regulatory, and technological pressures. And these pressures have not only accelerated consolidation, but have also redefined what it takes for banks to remain competitive. In this presentation, we'll explore the underlying drivers behind the recent surge in bank mergers, the strategic value of scale, the role of technology investment, the evolving regulatory environment, and the potential risk ahead. First, let's talk about the key drivers behind the rise in merger activities across the banking sector. The two primary forces we'll focus on are the significant increase in merger volume and the role of technology investment as a competitive necessity. Bank mergers have surged dramatically, with 2025 alone seeing about 47 billion in announced deals, surpassing the total from both 2023 and 2024 combined. This reflects a renewed appetite for consolidation after years of hesitation due to economic shock and regulatory tightening. One major reason for this shift is the improvement in market conditions. As interest rates stabilized, banks saw a significant reduction in unrealized losses on long-term assets. And in fact, these losses have been cut roughly in half. The change has made acquisition targets look much healthier and far less risky. Another factor is the increasing importance of scale. The retail banking market continues to commodify. What that means is that banks can no longer rely solely on branch networks or traditional services to differentiate themselves. Instead, technology, so everything from digital banking to AI-driven customer experience tools, has become central to competitive strategy. For many banks, especially the smaller ones, achieving this technological capability on their own is very expensive. So mergers become the clearest path to scale, efficiency, and modernization. Technology is no longer a supporting function in banking. It has become the primary driver of competitive differentiation. Industry-wide banks' technology spending is projected to climb to $760 billion. Today, up to $1.1 trillion by 2029. And some banks like JP Morgan Chase are already investing more than $18 billion per year in technology alone. For smaller institutions, Keeping up with this level of investment is extremely difficult, and as a result, mergers offer a way to pool resources, upgrade legacy systems, and modernize at a pace. Key areas of investment include cybersecurity, mobile banking platforms, AI services, customer analytics, and real-time digital payment infrastructure. Scale allows banks to share costs, accelerate innovation, and reduce the operational drag of outdated systems, all of which strengthen competitive positioning. This is why we see technology as one of the strongest strategic catalysts behind recent mergers. So next, let's turn to the regulatory and financial environment. Recent changes have reduced several long-standing barriers to mergers, making consolidation far more attractive than in previous years. The regulatory landscape has evolved in ways that make mergers easier to complete and less risky for the acquiring institutions. A major development came from the Financial Accounting Standard Board, which removed the requirement for banks to double count credit loss risk when acquiring loan portfolios. This accounting change removes a significant cost burden and reduces the perceived financial downside of acquisitions. We've also seen easing capital requirements for large banks. With more bank-friendly leadership, such as the near-confirmed appointment of a new FDIC permanent head, banks feel more confident about crossing major asset thresholds, like the $250 billion mark. In addition, the deal approval timeline is speeding up. A good example is the Pinnacle Synovus merger, which was approved in just 5.5 months. Analysts estimate that regulatory loosening could unlock up to $2.6 trillion in lending capacity, giving banks more room to grow and pursue acquisitions strategically. The financial side of the story is just as important. As interest rates peaked in prior years, banks were forced to report large unrealized losses on long-term securities, which made mergers unattractive. But over the past 3 years, these losses have dropped by half, restoring confidence among acquirers and stabilizing balance sheets. And with better financial conditions, banks can focus on long-term strategy, achieving scale, reducing unit costs, and building competitive resilience. Some banks are even willing to cross regulatory thresholds that they previously avoided, demonstrating a belief that the potential financial benefits outweigh the additional regulatory burden. Ultimately, stronger market conditions and improved regulatory clarity are creating an environment where mergers are viewed as not only feasible but strategically advantageous. So we've referenced scale several times already. So now let's explore exactly why scale has become a powerful competitive factor in banking. Scale shapes competitive advantage in multiple ways. As retail banking becomes more commodified, differentiation increasingly depends on operational efficiency, technology, and customer experience. Larger banks can distribute fixed costs such as digital infrastructure, compliance, cybersecurity, and AI platforms across far larger customer asset bases. This lowers the cost per user and allows big banks to price more competitively and invest more aggressively in innovation. Mergers also expand geographic reach, diversify revenue streams, and broaden customer access. Banks like Fifth Third and Huntington made acquisitions that pushed them beyond the $250 billion threshold, signaling confidence that the advantage of scale outweighs additional oversight. In a market evolving as quickly as modern banking, scale is not just helpful, it's increasingly essential. Now let's look at a few case studies that illustrate how banks are using mergers to drive strategic growth. Fifth Third Bank in Huntington completed major acquisitions valued of $10.9 billion and $7.4 billion respectively. That intentionally moved them into a higher regulatory category. This reflects a growing belief that the benefits of scale, especially in tech and operational capacity, outweigh the cost of heightened oversight. Additionally, the Pinnacle Synovus deal highlights how faster regulatory approvals reduce deal risk and make consolidation more attractive. With the approval completed in just over 5 months, this merger became a model of how quickly the right regulatory environment can affect merger and acquisition strategy. Across these examples, the focus is the same: growth, modernization, and long-term competitive strength. Despite the momentum behind bank mergers, there are risks ahead, especially political and regulatory risks that could shift the environment once again. The 2026 midterm elections pose a significant uncertainty for the banking industry. While leadership changes won't happen immediately, the composition of congressional oversight committees may shift. This would influence how aggressively banks are monitored and how readily future mergers are approved. Regulatory instability tends to slow deal approvals and increase perceived acquisition risk. Banks understand this. This is why many executives are cautious about publicly discussing merger intentions. There's also concern over the broader corporate lending environment, which could trigger tighter regulatory scrutiny if conditions deteriorate. The key takeaway is that banks need to strategically time their mergers, aiming to complete deals while conditions remain favorable and more potential policy changes introduce these new constraints. Finally, let's look at how all of these factors come together to shape banks' long-term competitive advantage. Mergers offer banks a pathway to long-term resilience and strength. By gaining scale, banks can expand capabilities, improve operational efficiency, and invest in technologies that enhance customer experience and risk management. Consolidation also allows banks to broaden their market reach and compete more effectively with both traditional rivals and disrupt fintech firms. But achieving these benefits requires more than closing the deal. Success depends on careful integration. So you got to align culture, technology systems, and operational processes. Banks that manage integration well can unlock synergies that boost profitability and reduce risk. Overall, mergers enable banks to move from a defensive posture, they're not trying to fall behind technologically, to an offensive strategy to focus on growth, innovation, and market leadership. As regulatory, technology, and financial conditions continue to evolve, mergers will remain a central tool for banks seeking sustainable competitive advantage. Thank you. Once again, my name is Ariane Michaud. Have a good one.